What's up, everybody? Welcome to ShoBooVie. Your pal Miles here. For those of you who have been to ShoBooVie before, thanks for coming back. For those of you who this is your first episode, a little breakdown of what we do here. First, I'm going to take a show, a book, and a movie, as you can see in our super cool logo, made by my sister Deanna. Shout out Deanna. She also made the website. If you haven't been on there yet, go check it out. But basically, we take one of each of those bits of media and we tie them together with a nice little thematic through line. So, for example, if we take Ryan Gosling in the show Mickey Mouse Club, we take him in the adaptation of the book Project Hail Mary and his performance in Barbie. The through line that we established there is that he's always been an awesome and charming person. So, hope that kind of fleshes out what we're doing here. Something else about ShoBooVie, which you'll undoubtedly notice if you haven't already, which is that there's no editing. It's just a streamlined, raw, real time kind of situation here because I don't want to learn how to edit because it seems really hard and really difficult to do and just really time consuming. So, because of that, you're going to deal with me kind of spitting on myself, stumbling over my words. Maybe I lose my train of thought, but whatever keeps things exciting, you know? But anyway, this month's theme is man and nature. Now, a really common conflict in the history of storytelling is man versus nature, but that's not necessarily what we're going to do here. Man versus nature, some common examples of that is like Robinson Crusoe over here, Robinson Crusoe. Man stranded on a desert island, or Jurassic Park, for example, man versus the forces of nature. We're going to do something a little bit different with this episode, which is we're going to jump into man's place in nature. So it's sort of a variant of that really common conflict. And we're going to do that by checking out the show Lost, the greatest book of all time, Moby Dick, and the modern classic Christopher Nolan movie Oppenheimer. So, first, let's go ahead and dig into Lost, which Lost was like my first television love. I was just obsessed with this show. And it's still my fourth favorite show of all time. You can see that in my favorite show list on the website, actually. But it's an amazing show. It came out in 2004. And what it is it's the story of a bunch of folks stranded on a deserted island. And that's to put it simply. But Lost became this huge phenomenon because there's all sorts of different aspects of the island that are just totally unexplained. And even by the end of the show, some of them aren't totally explained. There's random polar bears on the island. There's a mysterious hatch that's found on the island that no one can get into, but is obsessed with getting into for a while. There's a huge wheel that apparently moves the island through time in the center of the island. And then, of course, famously, there is a huge smoke monster that wreaks havoc on a bunch of people in the island, too. So there's some wacky, unexplained things going on in Lost. And honestly, I bought into like every bit, every crazy bit of the plot developments of it. But some people didn't, but like, whatever. I think it's an awesome show. But the thing that Lost, and one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed with it, and I still think it's so good, no matter the craziness that they throw at us, is because of this theme that I think falls pretty good in this episode, which is man's place in nature. And now, Lost, the concept of nature that I'm using here is sort of the concept of like fate and circumstance and coincidence and things like that. That's a huge topic in Lost, which is sort of like that philosophical idea of like, why are we where we are? Why are the things that are happening to us happening to us? And the solution that Lost finds time and time again to those questions is community. Because as you see here, we have quite a crop of characters here. And literally, no matter their differences, the only way for them to get through all of this is to become a community. We have an ex Iraqi torturer. We have a con man. We have a doctor. We have a Korean couple that don't speak a word of English. We have an ex-con. So it's very, very broad amount of people. But so they essentially figure out, and the motto of the show is that if they don't live together, they die alone. And I'm just going to go ahead and let the show speak for itself on that note.
It's been 6 days. We're all still waiting. Waiting for someone to come. But what if they don't? We have to stop waiting. We need to start figuring things out. A woman died this morning just going for a swim. And he tried to save her, and now you're about to crucify him? We can't do this. Every man for himself is not going to work. It's time to start organizing. We need to figure out how we're going to survive here. Now, I found water. Fresh water up in the valley. I'll take a group in at first light. If you don't want to come, then find another way to contribute. Last week, most of us were strangers. But we're all here now. And God knows how long we're going to be here. But if we can't live together, we're going to die alone.
That's kind of lost in a nutshell. And if you think about it, there's a lot to expound on here because they're sort of just talking about life in a nutshell. Like he says here, like, we don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know what we're going to run into. Like, people are dying, tragedies are happening, but we don't know what's happening we don't know what's going to happen in the world, in the nature of the world, the random nature, the fateful nature, whatever you want to think about why we're here and what's going on. But with Lost, given this theme of man's place in nature, they examine it by saying that the only way we're going to get through whatever's going on in the natural world and all of the craziness it wants to throw at us is by coming together as a community. Pretty awesome theme. And it helps that it's conveyed with one of the greatest casts in TV history. From there, we're going to move on to Moby Dick, which I just read. You guys might remember it from the last newsletter that we sent out. I think it's the greatest book I've ever read. Greatest book ever. It's like the great American novel, in my opinion. Everyone knows the story, whether you've actually picked up Moby Dick or not. Written by Herman Melville, the story of the deranged, crazy, monomaniacal Captain Ahab trying to hunt down the great white whale, Moby Dick, who took his leg. And Moby Dick is just this huge, murderous, violent, crazy whale. Uh, it's like practically biblical and just like massive in its scope. And it's one of the best examples of man and nature in really any bit of media. And that's through some specific chapters that I think are some really great examples that kind of show that theme. For example, there's an entire chapter on like the jawbone of the whale, the mouth of the whale. There's a whole chapter about the view from the mast, just looking out into the ocean and how it just seems impossibly large. There's another chapter about the mechanics of the blowhole of the whale, another about the tail, the anatomical details of the tail, and another just about the color white and how it exists in nature. And that may sound really random for a book about a revenge insane or vengeance deranged man trying to hunt down a whale. But what Melville's doing with these like little sort of like sub conversations that he's having, that our narrator Ishmael, famous Ishmael, is having and taking us on, is Melville is really detailing man's place in nature, the exact theme of our episode here. And he's doing that by really taking like really detailed looks at these really seemingly random things. But what he's trying to show in how random are his observations is that as mankind, sometimes, most of the time, we take nature for granted because the level of detail and intricacy and deliberation that goes into anything in the world around us, like a whale's blowhole, or just the surface of the ocean, or the color white. All of these things are so much more intricate than we even consider on a day to day basis because, like Captain Ahab, we get blinded by whatever's going on in our lives. So, in this case, Melville is really trying to hammer home that mankind can get so wrapped up in itself, but really some of these notions that mankind is so obsessed with are so small when it comes to just this massive, detailed scope of nature. And speaking of the smallness of mankind in regards to the powers of nature, that takes us to Oppenheimer, which is one of the best movies of the decade so far. I think on my list that I have also on ShoBooVie of the best movies of the decade, I think I have it at third right now. Um, but you can go check out the list. But anyway, maybe Christopher Nolan's best movie, which is insane considering this is the guy that made Inception and The Dark Knight and all these modern classic movies. But of course, it's the story of Robert or J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, role of a lifetime. And we have two concurring stories. And one of those stories is Oppenheimer building the bomb. And it's this big race against time because obviously World War II is going on and it's just ravaging the planet, obviously. The other story that we have, which is shot in black and white to help delineate it, is the story of Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who is a man named Strauss, who is basically actively seeking to sabotage Oppenheimer after this is years after he's made the bomb. And what we kind of see here is, and first of all, this may sound like really boring, even though I use like Race Against Time. And it is like the 3 hour movie too, that mostly consists of men just speaking to each other. But it is like the sense of urgency and panic and stress that they go through, especially in the building of the bomb, is like it's expertly shot, super well directed. It's like one of the most intense biopics ever, probably the most intense because of the stakes that they're dealing with. But speaking of those stakes, that's what I want to talk about with Oppenheimer, because they're talking about building a nuclear bomb, the most powerful weapon ever made in mankind's history. But then you have Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who was hung up on an offense that he took from Oppenheimer years ago. And because of that, he seeks to essentially destroy Oppenheimer's reputation and life. And by having that side by side, that really petty bit of vengeance, which basically makes up the back half of the movie, with that earlier segment of Oppenheimer building the bomb. And then finally, we arrive at the conclusion of the movie where they realize the scope of what they've done. It kind of puts it into perspective. Nolan is really driving at a similar point as Melville, but maybe a little bit more cynical, that a lot of man's little petty, crappy little rivalries and feuds and just the little things we want to get hung up on as humans pale in comparison to some of the things we're attempting to tamper with as people. It's mankind's own ego getting in the way of things that we think we understand that we don't. And Oppenheimer, you can kind of see him go through this experience in this clip that I found that's kind of like a just a random clip edited of different parts of the movie. But this is him, and he's so arrogant in the beginning of the movie about while he's building the bomb, but as it starts to weigh on him, this is where Nolan's theme of man toying with nature and playing with powers beyond their comprehension really comes into play here.
World will remember this day.
So a really speedy clip there, but that shows some visions that Oppenheimer is essentially having after they already made the bomb, where he's realizing, wow, like my ego and arrogance kind of prevented me from realizing the true consequences of what we were doing here. And you pair that with Robert Downey Jr.'s little petty feud that he has with Oppenheimer, and suddenly some of the things that mankind deals with on a day to day basis fail to adequately compare to some of the things that we think we understand about the power of nature. And so those are three different circumstances that we see man and his place in nature, their place in nature, handled in media. So I hope you guys dug it. Trying to play a little fast and loose with the kind of classic concept of man versus nature, but I hope you guys liked it. And if you did, go check out the website. I think we have 14 other episodes on there. Been doing this for a little while now. Let me know what you guys want to see next. I've got a few episodes in the chamber, one about time travel, one about failures in human communication. But let me know if you want to see anything else, any other bits of media. But in the meantime, check us out, like us on Facebook, Instagram, go to the site, read some reviews, check out some lists, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.